Well, Boris Johnson, I hope, will get us out on October the 31st. I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. I worked with him at City Hall when he was the mayor. He'll get a very good team around him, and I think he knows that his success as being Prime Minister is very much dependent on the promises he made. So I hope that with all those around him who will be pushing him to stick to his promises, that we will actually leave on October the 31st. And once we leave, that changes the whole nature of politics again, I think. Boris has said that he's prepared to go for a no deal, WTO terms. Obviously only if he can't get the European Union to make changes, big changes to the withdrawal agreement. And he will go in there, I think, in a much more combative way than Theresa May ever did. That's part of the problem, that I don't think the European Union ever thought that we were serious about getting a really good deal, that they felt they could say anything to us and that we would accept it. And it seems like the whole backstop came from us, really, and that we then allowed the EU to turn that into such a major issue. So yes, I feel strongly that Boris will, if it comes to the crunch, be prepared to take us out, because the preparation needs to be happening now, and I think he will, I hope Boris will put in a large amount of work and effort now and money into getting ready for a situation where we leave with no immediate deal. But let's not forget, we've got lots of little deals already there. It's not as if we're going to end up with nothing. We've already got agreement over planes flying. We've got agreement over a number of other areas. And once we're out, and once the EU know that we are prepared to have a no deal, then I think they're going to be much more likely to give us some changes that might just get a deal through Parliament. What has been happening in the Labour Party is very worrying. The changes that are being gradually pushed through, the drip towards becoming a fully 100% Remain party, I think is very dangerous. It's dangerous because it means that we will have lost the trust of all those Labour supporting Leave voters who came back to us and voted in 2017 because they believed it when Jeremy Corbyn said that we would honour the referendum result. So we will lose that trust. But also because if we're serious about wanting to win a general election, the top 20 seats that we need to win, nearly all of those are actually Leave seats. And so many of our MPs in the North and in the Midlands who were campaigning for Remain, but their seats went the way of the UK vote, i.e. to Leave, are now in a situation where they know that they're literally losing votes day by day because of the change. And I think that Jeremy has held the line very well for a long time. He was really quite determined that we were going to stick to the manifesto, but he has been pushed and and I think sold out by some of his own cabinet, shadow cabinet, and of course by many of those members of Parliament who never wanted Jeremy and who did everything they could to stop him being elected, and then a year afterwards to try and get rid of him. And they have used Brexit and they have used other issues to just completely pull the rug from under Jeremy. And I think that that will not be seen by really staunch Labour supporters as something that should have been happening in our party. So I think the Labour Party is on a cliff edge, really. Talk about cliff edges for no deal. I think Labour Party is on a cliff edge as to whether it's going to go right over that at its conference and become a fully campaigning Remain party, or whether they're going to pull back and realise before it's too late that this change is very damaging and makes it almost impossible for Labour to win a general election. What we've seen in the last few weeks with the shenanigans really that have gone on in the European Union in terms of changing their commission, I think has made, of course, all of us who already knew how anti-democratic it was, even more strong that we were right to be campaigning to leave. But I think it has shown the public, a lot of whom didn't quite understand how the system worked and actually believed that somehow the Parliament had this great democratic control. Well, of course, Parliament votes ultimately for the Commissioner, but they're given one name. And it's, the idea that that is democratic, and the idea also that they can really change anything, I think is showing the public once again that, we're leaving at the right time, because it's going to change even more and become even more of a centralised bureaucracy. It's interesting that very little has been tweeted by the Remain campaign, by the People's Vote campaign about all of this, because what I think we're seeing now is that some people who voted Remain and were very sad that we were leaving have now also started to understand the democratic aspect of the European Union, and that not only would it be absolutely ridiculous to have another referendum going against the first democratic referendum, but that actually democracy itself is not being served by the European Union, and that we will see more and more moves towards majority voting, a federal kind of situation where our country would have been even more and more isolated, because we are different. We're an island nation. We see ourselves differently. We don't see the need. We see the need for cooperation and working together, but not under a system that actually takes away power from our own parliament. And despite the fact that politics in this country at the moment many people see it as not working very well, it's working a lot better than what we see in the European Union. So I'm so surprised that actually we got such a lot of media attention to it, because the media has not been very good at pointing out some of the worst failings of the European Union. And now we've seen it in practice, and it just made me feel, thank goodness we won that vote. I think the Labour Party needs to be very, very conscious of the fact that the Brexit Party is doing extremely well, not just in the European Union elections, where they went from just having been formed really a few weeks before to winning overall and having 29 MEPs. I think Labour needs to realise that many of our disillusioned Labour supporters now have somewhere to go to. I remember over the years, and I've been the MP now for 30 years, I remember people saying at different times when Labour was doing things that were really not very sensible, like, for example, the raising of the pension by such a tiny amount. And I remember some of my colleagues actually saying, well, we may be unpopular, but they've got nowhere else to go, Labour voters. That's no longer true. The Brexit Party bringing in people from different political backgrounds, you cannot, unless you're a complete and utter zealot Remainer, you cannot actually say that the Brexit Party is right-wing anymore. Yes, there are people in it who would have different views on the economic future of our country and the way to get to that future, but there are so many people who've joined it who are actually from the left, and they have MEPs from the left. So I think that we need to really realise that that is a huge battle that we're going to have, even if Boris Johnson manages to get us out of the European Union at the end of October. I don't think the Brexit Party will go away, because they have discovered that there are people out there who are fed up with having been treated as if they weren't important, that their areas have been ignored and left, and that neither of the mainstream parties have been picking up on that nearly enough. The way the Electoral Commission treated Darren Grimes, I think, is a real travesty of justice. He was told twice that there was no case to answer, and then after a huge amount of lobbying by Remain QCs with plenty of money, they rode back on that and investigated again and found, because he'd ticked the wrong box, fined him the maximum fine. Now, I know the fine was only £20,000, only £20,000. Nevertheless, for Darren himself to have left that, it would have been over. It was in his name, and he would have then spent the rest of his life with that hanging over him. So he's quite right to appeal it, and I was delighted for him and for all his supporters that he won. And I think it really does raise questions about the way the Electoral Commission worked. I mean, we saw the way it worked during the referendum campaign, the strange things that it did. Yes, it has fined very small amounts of some of the Remain parties, but there's no doubt about it. If you look at the membership of the Electoral Commission, most of them on it were Remainers, have said things that were about Remain, and I just think that's not feasible to continue with an Electoral Commission that is so one-sided. So I think one of the things that the new government has to do, the new Prime Minister, has to actually look at the Electoral Commission. We need a system of some kind monitoring elections, but we certainly don't need the Electoral Commission the way it is at the moment, and I would be very happy if it was disbanded and they started all over again. Boris coming in now gives the real chance to get us out. And I think let's not forget that there's a majority of Remain MPs, and some of them have spent their whole time since the referendum trying to stop it. But there comes a point when I think even they will realise that the public is fed up with this and that they want to get us out. And if we don't get out, and there is a situation where we have to have another referendum because somebody decides that it definitely is going to happen and we're pushed into that rather than a general election, then I think the Leave campaign will be stronger than ever this time. I think we would win by a bigger majority because people now have understood what the European Union really, how it behaves and what it's going to be like in the future. And it's like one of those things where if someone was saying, now, if we weren't members, would you like to join? I don't think there would be many people who would want to join. We can separate out and we can get a good trading relationship with the rest of the world, including the European Union members, but we will have our independence back and we will be a country that we can be proud of again and look to the future. And that's what I hope the impetus of a new Prime Minister will really make a difference, and that Boris will have to get on with getting us out and getting us out cleanly and efficiently by October the 31st.